What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and if you're new to the podcast, welcome. We got several different types of, segments, if you want to call them that, or different versions or episodes where we have rants, full-length interviews, mental minutes, and deep dive educational explorations into small intricacies of the game. Um, I personally think this one's kind of more of a storytelling, but you could put it in the category of a mental minute, right? And this one is going to be called The Tale of Two Athletes, right? So basically, we'll just kind of phrase this out or paint a picture in your head, if you will, of two totally different polarizing athletes, both really, really good at what they do, but two very, very different approaches and the way they even just kind of go about life, right? So, athlete A, born into poverty and kind of emerged into this really great baseball player. Um, he had different habits and lifestyles, but became really, really good. And for example, like for his breakfast, he would have pancakes, bacon, eggs, and also beer, champagne. And in between games, he would have hot dogs or, just really greasy type foods, drinking sodas and stuff like that. Very, just kind of no routine at all, right? Going out, going to nightclubs, parties, little sleep. But yeah, he still figured it out and knew how to play, right? Like just the dude was a ball player through and through and just showed up and would always somehow find a way to make it happen, right? And on the other flip side of that, you have athlete B, who is, all-American guy, maybe came in from, a really well-knit family and very quiet, very disciplined, who didn't do any partying or anything like that, right? Stuck to his particular routines, right? Very meticulous in what he did, right? His breakfast was like oatmeal, boiled eggs, toast, milk, or, protein drinks, right? Like things like that that he would kind of hone in on. And he would actually avoid greasy, clubhouse foods with his teammates poking fun at him, saying that he would just bring his lunch, right? He would get up early in the mornings, stretching, some training, working out, right? And I kept a notebook to study all of his opponents, right? Someone that very, very similar to what you'd see a professional guy do today, right? Avoiding alcohol and tobacco, maybe occasionally having a drink or two, but still prioritizes sleep, family time, and all of that. Never really went out to the clubs or anything like that. With those two athletes, they were both on the same team and both performed equally for a good front part of their careers, right? Um, and to kind of just get a little bit deeper into this, these are real athletes, by the way. If you may or may not have picked up on it, right? That athlete A was the big fella, right? AKA Baby Ruth, right? He did all of that, had no routine at all, went to speakeasies, was really into just drinking, gambling, but his weight fluctuated, illnesses and fatigue kind of caught up to him, and towards the end of his career, right, he kind of fell off, got up to I think about 240 pounds, but still, hey, the guy hit 714 career home runs and did a lot of, you know, really, really big things, and he would even call his home run shot, right? Everyone remembers that kind of as like an iconic thing where he's like, "Hey, I'm about to hit my home run here right before," and he delivered, right? But funny thing about that is no one remembers that the athlete B that I'm talking about, Lou Gehrig, also hit a home run right after, but he didn't call a shot. He didn't do any flashy things or anything to kind of bring attention to himself. He just went in and hammered it, right? But I think a lot of that, even with athlete B, that unfortunately did catch up to him where he played so many games in a row, even though he was very hardworking and did all this stuff. It eventually caught up to him, and obviously he is you guys might know the story here, but he did develop ALS and ended up passing a lot earlier than he should have. And I personally think these were two very big archetypes, if you will, of someone who doesn't take their training very seriously and just kind of goes with the flow, and someone who takes it too seriously, right? And, never gives himself an off day or just grinds through everything. And again, I think they're both very, very awesome things and don't want to take away from their legacies in any ways here at all, right? Um, but it's just something to kind of think about when you're looking at these, and especially later on in their lives, right? Babe Ruth, he had that gluttony and drinking issues, which, his performance dropped off after a while back or into the 1930s. Um, but he, post career wise, right, really struggled to find purpose in his life. He tried coaching a few times, um, but that just kind of complicated things for him later on down in life. Obviously, he still had that iconic record book number, which again, Hank Aaron and then Barry Bonds would eventually break. But he was just that lifelong legend. And, just something there, like living that lavishly and just, you know, frivolously, I should say, it does have diminishing returns, right? Versus athlete B, right? Like I said, having ALS discipline habits kind of gave him a little bit more of letting him play a little bit longer, but it did eventually catch up to him. And I think he leaves a little bit more of, hey, like this is resilience and having a streak of just playing day in and day out. I think it was a 1,200 something games or something like that, which I think Cal Ripken eventually beat, but still insane, right? And he kind of turned that into him being, having all of this, being the luckiest man alive. And there goes the famous speech for that one. I'm sure you all, if you haven't listened to that, maybe some of you younger guys definitely listen to it. Um, it brings things a lot into perspective. But really, I think where you can take things from both athlete A, Babe Ruth, and athlete B, Lou Gehrig, right, is for a Babe Ruth, like, hey, you can be bold, you can have fun, you can have a good time, but you got to know when to pull back the reins, right? Not let that get too far out of your reach. For Lou Gehrig, right, staying consistent, but don't fear of maybe even speaking up or standing out and just kind of being a quiet little mouse and give yourself a break every once in a while, right? Like even I think guys today kind of understand that and they know like there's science behind having a rest day here and there versus just powering through 10 straight days of double headers and crazy things that they ended up doing. I'm not saying that that led to his demise necessarily, but it definitely did catch up to him for a while. Um, but for both of them, really, they embrace their authenticity, right? They both kind of complimented each other in a way where Babe would ask if he wanted a shot or things like that, just kind of reading stories up on him and you know putting this into perspective for this specific podcast. And also, Gehrig never really verbally resented Babe, which I think was great, and he didn't make it public or anything. He might maybe said some things privately in the clubhouse that we may not know about, but it's something that I think we can all learn from and have from those two very polarizing ends to find your best in the middle. Um, and I think two quotes for these guys kind of brings it all together, right? Babe Ruth, everyone knows this one. Never let the fear of striking you out keep you from playing the game. And that definitely personifies Babe to a T, right? He doesn't let fear of what other people think or what other things are going on or what people say keep him from doing his thing, right? And from Lou Gehrig, his quote would be, I may have had a tough break, but I've had an awful lot to live for, right? Being so family oriented and tied down where he's like, hey, like I may not have been the, you know, just poster child for health and everything, right? Because he ended up getting ALS, but he lived a very fulfilling life in his own eyes for the short amount that he did and made the best of it. So, hope you guys got something out of this. Obviously, I'll leave this up to your interpretation. If you think one is better than the other, obviously you can perform well at both, at either one of those pots. In my personal opinion, and again, I'll leave it up to your guys' interpretation, but I think the best of both worlds are having a little bit of both where you can have fun and be boisterous and have a good time when it comes to having a good time. There's time for it. Maybe that's just in the off season. I don't know. And then there's also the point where you need to be disciplined. You need to be stoic. You need to be able to stick to routines and be very, very disciplined. And I think that should really be instilled in everyone. However, you can't be gripping that bat so tight or that ball so tight. And what something that I kind of came into realizing was I was so focused and so honed in on it that it actually led to my Achilles heel, if you will, in my career because I was so trying to be so perfect in that. And again, very far polarizing ends that if you can clash the two together, you have an absolutely awesome athlete and person, human, I think. So appreciate you guys tuning in and listening and stay in the zone.